Rain slammed against the window of my cramped Brooklyn apartment, each drop a tiny fist pounding out the rhythm of my racing heart. I stood frozen, my lips still tingling from Riley's kiss, her breath warm against my skin as we broke apart. Then the door creaked open, and there was Aunt Clara, her eyes wide with shock, clutching her umbrella like a lifeline. This wasn't how I imagined coming out. At 22, I thought I had time to figure myself out, to carve a path through the chaos of my life before anyone else got a say. But Riley had stormed into my world like a hurricane, and now everything was spinning out of control. I met Riley 3 months ago at a dive bar in Williamsburg. She was leaning against the jukebox, her short brown hair catching the neon glow, her leather jacket slung carelessly over one shoulder. She looked like trouble, the kind you chase anyway. I was nursing a cheap beer, trying to blend into the crowd, but her eyes found mine like she'd been searching for me her whole life. "You look like you're hiding," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. Her voice was low, teasing, but there was something real beneath it, something that made my chest ache. I wasn't hiding. Not exactly. I'd moved to New York after college to escape the suffocating small-town vibes of upstate New York, where everyone knew everyone's business. My parents were good people, but they didn't get minute the way I felt about love, about who I could love. Aunt Clara, my mom's older sister, was the only one who ever seemed to see me. She'd been my rock growing up, the one who taught me how to throw a punch and laugh at the world's judgment. But even she didn't know the truth about me. Not until tonight. Riley and I talked until the bar closed that first night. She told me about her life growing up in foster care, bouncing from home to home, learning to fight for herself because no one else would. She was 23, a year older than me, but her eyes held stories I couldn't imagine. I told her about my dreams of being a writer, about the stories I scribbled in notebooks I never showed anyone. By the time we stumbled into the street, the city buzzing around us, I knew I was in deep. We started meeting up after that, coffee shops, late-night walks through Prospect Park, stolen moments in her tiny studio apartment. Every touch, every glance, felt like a secret we were keeping from the world. I'd never been with a woman before, but with Riley, it felt like the most natural thing in the universe. Like I'd been waiting my whole life to feel this alive. But secrets don't stay buried forever. Aunt Clara's visit was unexpected. She called earlier, saying she was in the city for a conference and wanted to drop by. I'd meant to tell Riley to leave, to keep things under wraps until I was ready. But Riley had a way of making me forget everything else. We'd been kissing on my couch, her hands tangled in my hair, when the door swung open. "Ellie." Aunt Clara's voice was sharp, cutting through the haze. Riley pulled back, her jaw tight, but she didn't let go of my hand. I could feel her pulse racing through her fingers, matching mine. "Aunt Clara." My voice cracked. I wanted to explain, to make her understand, but the words wouldn't come. All I could see was the shock on her face, the way her shoulders stiffened like she was bracing for a fight. Clara set her umbrella down, slow and deliberate, her eyes flicking between me and Riley. "Who's this?" she asked, her tone unreadable. "This is Riley," I said, my voice steadier now. "She's important to me." Riley squeezed my hand, a silent promise that she wasn't going anywhere. I don't know what I expected: anger, disappointment, maybe even disgust. But Clara just stood there, her expression softening as she looked at me. Really looked at me, like she was seeing me for the first time. "I didn't know," she said finally, her voice quiet. "Why didn't you tell me, Ellie?" The question hung in the air, heavy with years of unspoken truths. I wanted to tell her everything, how I'd been afraid, how I'd spent so long trying to fit into a world that didn't feel like mine. But before I could answer, Riley spoke up. She was scared, Riley said, her voice firm but gentle. She didn't know how you'd take it. But I'm not sorry, you know. I'm not sorry for any of this. Clara's eyes narrowed, studying Riley like she was sizing her up. Then, to my surprise, she laughed, a short, sharp sound that broke the tension in the room. You've got guts, kid, she said, shaking her head. Both of you. The rain kept falling outside, but inside, something shifted. Clara didn't leave, didn't turn away. Instead, she pulled out a chair and sat down, gesturing for us to do the same. All right, she said, her voice steady now. Let's talk. That night, we talked until the early hours about love, about fear, about what it meant to be true to yourself in a world that didn't always make it easy. Clara didn't judge, didn't lecture. She listened, her eyes soft with understanding. And for the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone in this. But the story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Riley's past was a shadow that followed her everywhere. And mine wasn't exactly free of ghosts either. As the weeks turned into months, our love would be tested by family, by secrets, by the kind of pain that makes you question everything. But that night, with the rain pouring down and Aunt Clara sitting across from us, I knew one thing for sure: I was done hiding. The weeks after Aunt Clara's surprise visit felt like walking on a tightrope. Riley and I were closer than ever. But the weight of her knowing, of anyone knowing, hung over me like a storm cloud. I wasn't ready for the world to see us. But Riley had other ideas. She was fearless in a way I envied. One Saturday, we were at a flea market in Dumbo, rifling through vintage records, when she grabbed my hand and pulled me into a dance right there in the middle of the crowd. Her laugh was loud, unapologetic, and for a moment, I forgot to care who was watching. Let them stare, she whispered, her lips brushing my ear. We're not invisible. But I felt invisible sometimes, even with her. Growing up, I'd learned to shrink myself, to keep my feelings locked away where no one could judge them. Riley was the opposite. She wore her heart like a badge, daring the world to take a swing. It was one of the things I loved about her. But it scared me too. What if her courage dragged us into something we weren't ready for? Aunt Clara, true to her word, didn't tell my parents. She called me the next day, her voice warm but firm. Ellie, you don't have to figure this all out at once, she said. But you've got to start being honest with yourself. That girl Riley's good for you. Don't let fear ruin it. Her words stuck with me, but fear wasn't so easy to shake. My parents were coming to visit in a week, and the thought of them finding out about Riley made my stomach twist. They weren't cruel, but they were traditional, the kind of people who thought love followed a script. I could already hear my mom's voice, soft but insistent. You're just confused, Ellie. You'll find the right guy someday. Riley sensed my anxiety, even when I tried to hide it. One night, as we lay tangled in her sheets, the city humming outside her window, she propped herself up on one elbow and looked at me. You're freaking out about your parents, aren't you? She asked, her voice gentle but direct. I sighed, staring at the ceiling. I don't know how to tell them. What if they don't get it? What if they hate me? They won't hate you, Riley said, her fingers tracing circles on my arm. They might not understand right away, but that's their problem, not yours. You're allowed to love who you love, Ellie. Her words were a lifeline, but they didn't erase the dread pooling in my chest. I wanted to believe her, to borrow her strength. But the truth was, I wasn't sure I was ready to face my parents' disappointment. Or worse, their silence. The next day, Riley dragged me to a queer poetry slam in the East Village. The room was packed, the air thick with cigarette smoke and the buzz of voices. Performers poured their hearts out on stage stories of love, loss, and defiance that made my throat tight. Riley leaned close, her hand on my knee, whispering commentary that made me laugh despite myself. "That guy's got no rhythm," she'd mutter. Or "Damn, she's speaking my soul." One poet, a woman with a buzz cut and a voice like thunder, read a piece about her first lovey, a girl who broke her heart but taught her how to fight for herself. The words hit me hard, like they were written for me and Riley. When the poet finished, the crowd erupted, and Riley squeezed my hand. "That's us," she said, her eyes shining. "We're fighters, Ellie." I wanted to be a fighter, but the closer my parents' visit got, the more I felt like a coward. The night before they arrived, I couldn't sleep. I sat on my fire escape, the city sprawling below me, and tried to imagine telling them the truth. Every scenario ended in disaster: me mom crying, my dad walking out, their voices echoing with words I couldn't unhear. Riley found me out there, her jacket thrown over her pajamas. She didn't say anything, just sat beside me and rested her head on my shoulder. The silence between us was enough, her presence a reminder that I wasn't alone. But as the city lights blurred in my vision, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something bigger than my parents' visit, something that would test us in ways I couldn't yet see. The next morning, my parents arrived at Penn Station, all smiles and hugs, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. We spent the day doing touristy things: Central Park, a deli lunch, a walk across the Brooklyn Bridge. Riley stayed away, giving me space, but her absence felt like a missing limb. Every time my mom asked about my life, my job, my plans, I dodged the truth, the words "I'm in love with a woman" burning in my throat. That night, we went to dinner at a cozy Italian place in the West Village. My parents were in good spirits, laughing over wine and pasta, but I was a mess of nerves. Then, halfway through dessert, my mom reached across the table and took my hand. "Ellie," she said, her eyes soft, "you seem different. Is there something you want to tell us?" The question hit like a punch. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My dad raised an eyebrow, waiting. The restaurant noise faded, and all I could hear was my own heartbeat. This was the moment I'd been dreading. But before I could speak, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Riley: "Whatever happens, I've got you." I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. "Yeah," I said, my voice shaking. "There's something I need to tell you." The words hung in the air, heavy as the tiramisu on the table. My parents' eyes were locked on me, my mom's hand still gripping mine, my dad's fork frozen mid-bite. I could feel the weight of their expectations, the years of unspoken rules about who I was supposed to be. "I'm in love," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "With a woman. Her name's Riley." The restaurant seemed to hold its breath. My mom's grip tightened, then loosened, her face a mix of confusion and something softer: concern. "Maybe." My dad set his fork down, slow and deliberate, like he was processing a math problem with no clear solution. The silence stretched, and I braced for the worst. "Riley," my mom repeated, testing the name like it was a foreign word. How long has this been going on?" 3 months, I said, my throat tight. "But it's not just a phase, Mom. It's real. She's real." My dad leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. Ellie, you've never mentioned this before. Are you sure you're not just confused? There it was, the question I'd been dreading. I wanted to scream, to tell him I'd never been more sure of anything in my life. But the words caught in my chest. Instead, I thought of Riley, her fierce smile, her hand in mine, her voice telling me I was enough. I'm not confused, I said, stronger now. I love her, and I'm not going to hide it. My mom's eyes welled up, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But then she nodded, just once, like she was trying to understand. Okay, she said softly. Okay, Ellie. We need time. Time. It wasn't a rejection, but it wasn't acceptance either. It was a limbo I hadn't prepared for. My dad didn't say anything else, just signaled for the check. And we left the restaurant in a silence that felt heavier than the city itself. When I got back to my apartment, Riley was waiting for me on the stoop, her leather jacket glistening with rain. She stood up as I approached, her eyes searching mine. How'd it go? She asked, her voice cautious. I collapsed into her arms, the weight of the night crashing down. They didn't yell, I said, my voice muffled against her shoulder. But they didn't exactly throw a parade either. She held me tighter, her breath warm against my hair. You did it, Ellie. You told them. That's huge. I pulled back, looking into her eyes. What if they never come around? What if they can't handle it? Then we'll handle it, she said, her voice fierce. You and me. We're enough. For the next few days, I floated in a strange haze. My parents stayed in the city, but our conversations were careful, tiptoeing around the truth I'd laid bare. Aunt Clara called to check in, her voice a steady anchor. Give them time, kid, she said. They love you. They'll figure it out. But time felt like a luxury I didn't have. Riley's past was starting to creep into our present, and it wasn't the kind of thing you could ignore. She'd always been vague about her life before New York, dropping hints about foster homes and bad choices but never the full story. Then, one night, as we were cooking dinner in her tiny kitchen, she got a call that changed everything. Her face went pale as she listened, her knuckles white around the phone. Yeah, I'll be there, she said, her voice tight. When she hung up, she looked at me, her eyes haunted. That was my old caseworker. My sister Jesh's in trouble. I didn't even know Riley had a sister. She'd never mentioned her. Not once. What kind of trouble? I asked, my heart sinking. Riley hesitated, like she was weighing how much to tell me. Jess is 16. She's in a group home upstate. She ran away, and they think she's in the city. I need to find her. I nodded, grabbing my jacket. Then we find her. Together. The search for Jess took us to parts of New York I'd never seen, gritty corners of the Bronx, sketchy motels in Queens, places where the city's pulse felt raw and desperate. Riley was relentless, following every lead, her jaw set with a determination that scared me a little. I saw a new side of her, harder, sharper, like she'd been forged in a fire I couldn't understand. We finally found Jess in a rundown diner off the Bowery. Her hair dyed electric blue, her eyes hollow with exhaustion. She was a skinny kid, all sharp edges and defiance. But when she saw Riley, she broke. They hugged like they were holding on to life itself. And I stood back, feeling like an outsider in their story. Jess, this is Ellie, Riley said, pulling me forward. She's She's my person. Jess looked me up and down. Her expression guarded. You're the one she's been mooning over? She asked, a smirk tugging at her lips. I blushed. But Riley laughed, the sound easing the tension. Yeah, that's her, she said, her arm around my shoulders. That night, we took Jess back to Riley's apartment. She crashed on the couch, out cold in minutes. But Riley couldn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at a photo of her and Jess from years ago, their faces younger but already marked by loss. She's all I have left, Riley said, her voice barely audible. Our parents, they were bad news. I tried to protect her, but I failed. I left her behind when I aged out of the system. I reached for her hand, my heart aching. You're here now, I said. You're not failing her. But Riley's eyes were distant, like she was seeing ghosts I couldn't reach. And as I watched her, I realized our story was about to get a lot more complicated. Jess's arrival cracked open a door to Riley's past I hadn't been prepared for. She was a whirlwind of sarcasm and sharp edges. But beneath it, I could see the same fire that burned in Riley. The three of us spent the next few days navigating a fragile new normal, with Jess sleeping on Riley's couch and me splitting time between my place and hers. But the tension was palpable. Jess didn't trust easily, and Riley was stretched thin, trying to keep her sister safe while holding on to us. One morning, as I made coffee in Riley's cramped kitchen, Jess slumped into a chair, eyeing me warily. So, you and my sister, she said, popping a piece of toast in her mouth. What's the deal? You sticking around? Or you gonna bolt when things get messy? I nearly choked on my coffee. I'm not bolting, I said, meeting her gaze. I love her. Messy or not. Jess raised an eyebrow, like she was testing me. Good. 'Cause she's been through enough. Riley walked in then, her hair a mess from sleep, and caught the tail end of our conversation. You grilling my girlfriend, Jess? She asked, a playful edge to her voice. Just making sure she's not a flake. Jess shot back, but there was a grin tugging at her lips. Watching them together was like seeing Riley in a new light. She was protective, fierce, but there was a vulnerability there too, like she was terrified of letting Jess down again. I wanted to help, to be part of this, but I didn't know how to fit into their world, a world shaped by loss and survival. Things got messy when Riley's caseworker called again. Jess wasn't supposed to be in the city. She was still under the state's care, and running away had put her on their radar. They want her back in the group home, Riley told me, her voice tight with anger. But I'm not letting her go. She's not safe there. I didn't know much about the foster system, but I could see the fear in Riley's eyes. What can we do? I asked, feeling helpless. I don't know yet, she admitted. But I'm not losing her again. We spent the next few days digging into options: legal aid, emancipation papers, anything that could keep Jess with Riley. It was exhausting, a maze of bureaucracy and dead ends. But Riley didn't back down. I admired her strength, but it also scared me. She was diving headfirst into a fight that could break her, and I wasn't sure I was strong enough to keep up. Meanwhile, my own life was unraveling. My parents had gone back upstate, but their silence was louder than words. My mom sent a text, a polite, distant message about needing time to process. My dad didn't say anything at all. Aunt Clara tried to bridge the gap, inviting me over for dinner one night. They're struggling, Ellie, she said, pouring me a glass of wine. But they'll come around. You just keep being you. I wanted to believe her, but the doubt gnawed at me. What if they never accepted me? What if I was asking too much of them? Of Riley? Of myself? The breaking point came a week later. Riley got a call from a social worker, saying they'd track Jess to the city. If Riley didn't turn her over, there'd be consequences, legal ones. Riley's face was a storm of emotions as she hung up the phone. "They're coming for her tomorrow," she said, her voice hollow. "I can't let them take her." "Then we fight," I said, surprising myself with my own conviction. "We'll figure this out together." That night, we sat with Jess, explaining the situation. She was quiet, her usual bravado gone. "I don't want to go back," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They don't care about me there. Nobody does." Riley pulled her into a hug, her own eyes wet. "I care," she said fiercely. "And I'm not giving up." I reached out, touching Jess's shoulder. "We both care," I said. "You're not alone." The next morning, the social worker arrived at Riley's apartment, a stern woman with a clipboard and a no-nonsense attitude. Riley stood her ground, her voice steady as she argued for Jess to stay. I backed her up, fumbling through my own words. But the social worker wasn't swayed. "You don't have legal guardianship," she said. "Jess needs to come with me." It was like watching a piece of Riley break. Jess clung to her, tears streaming down her face, and I felt my own heart shatter. But then Riley did something I didn't expect. She pulled out a stack of papers, research we'd done, letters from a pro bono lawyer we'd found. "I'm filing for guardianship," she said, her voice shaking but resolute. "I'm her family. She belongs with me." The social worker hesitated, flipping through the papers. "This isn't enough," she said finally. "You'll need to go to court." "Then we'll go to court," Riley shot back, her eyes blazing. The woman left, giving us a temporary reprieve. But the fight was far from over. As the door closed, Riley sank to the floor, Jess still in her arms. I knelt beside them, my heart pounding. This was bigger than me, bigger than us. But I wasn't running. Not now. Not ever. The fight for Jess became our world. Riley threw herself into the legal battle with a ferocity that left me in awe. We spent nights poring over paperwork, meeting with lawyers, and preparing for the court date that loomed like a guillotine. Jess, meanwhile, was a ghost in Riley's apartment, quiet, withdrawn, like she was bracing for the worst. I tried to be the glue, holding us together, but I was struggling too. My parents' silence was a wound that wouldn't heal, and every unanswered call felt like a rejection. Aunt Clara kept checking in, her voice a lifeline, but even she couldn't fix the ache in my chest. I wanted to be strong for Riley, for Jess, but doubt was creeping in. Was I enough for this? For them? One night, as we sat in a diner waiting for a lawyer who was running late, Riley reached across the table and took my hand. "You're quiet," she said, her eyes searching mine. "What's going on in that head of yours?" I hesitated, the words stuck in my throat. "I'm scared," I admitted finally. "This is all so big, Jess. Your past. My parents. What if I'm not strong enough to handle it?" Riley's grip tightened, her gaze steady. "You're stronger than you think. Ellie. You're here, aren't you? That's more than most people would do." Her words warmed me, but they didn't erase the fear. I wanted to believe I could be the person she needed, but the weight of everything was crushing. Jess, picking at her fries, glanced up at us. "You two are gross," she muttered, but there was a flicker of a smile in her eyes. It was the first time I'd seen her relax in days. The court date arrived faster than I expected. We stood outside the courthouse, Riley in a borrowed blazer, her hands shaking as she clutched her paperwork. Jess was beside her, her blue hair tucked under a beanie, her face pale but defiant. I squeezed Riley's hand, trying to pour every ounce of strength I had into her. Inside, the courtroom was cold, sterile, the kind of place that stripped away hope. The judge was a stern older man. His voice clipped as he reviewed the case. Riley's lawyer argued passionately, laying out Riley's stability, her job, her commitment to Jess. But the state's attorney was relentless, pointing out Riley's lack of a permanent address, her history in foster care, her unconventional lifestyle. I felt my stomach twist as they mentioned our relationship, the words dripping with judgment. Riley didn't flinch. She stood tall, her voice clear as she spoke to the judge. "Jess is my family," she said. "I know I'm not perfect, but I love her. I'll fight for her every day of my life." Jess, sitting beside me, grabbed my hand under the table, her grip bruising. I could feel her trembling, and I realized how much this moment meant to hurt both of them. I wanted to protect them, to shield them from the world's cruelty, but all I could do was hold on. The judge didn't rule that day. He said he needed time to review the case, leaving us in limbo. As we left the courthouse, Riley's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of her. Jess was quiet, her eyes fixed on the ground. I wanted to say something, anything, to make it better, but words felt useless. That night, we went to a rooftop bar in Brooklyn, a place Riley loved for its view of the skyline. The city sparkled below us, a reminder of how big the world was, how small we felt in it. Jess sipped a soda, her usual snark subdued, and Riley stared out at the lights, her face unreadable. "I don't know what I'll do if they take her," Riley said finally, her voice barely audible over the wind. "They won't," I said, trying to sound certain. "We'll keep fighting." Riley turned to me, her eyes wet. "Why are you still here? Ellie, this is a mess. You could walk away." I took her face in my hands, my heart pounding. "Because I love you," I said. "And I love Jess. I'm not going anywhere." For the first time in days, Riley smiled a real, unguarded smile that made my chest ache. She kissed me, soft and desperate, and for a moment, the world felt right. But the next morning, everything changed. I woke to a missed call from my mom, her voicemail short and cryptic. "Ellie, we need to talk. In person." My stomach dropped. I hadn't heard from her in weeks. And now this. I showed the message to Riley, who frowned but nodded. "Go," she said. "You need to face this." I took the train upstate, my heart a tangle of hope and dread. When I walked into my parents' house, my mom was waiting in the kitchen, her eyes red from crying. My dad was there too, his face stern but softer than I expected. "We've been talking," my mom said, her voice shaking. "About you. About Riley." I braced myself, ready for the worst. But then my mom stood and pulled me into a hug, her arms tight around me. "We don't understand everything," she said. "But we love you, Ellie. We want you to be happy." It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. I cried. They cried. And for the first time, I felt like they might actually see me. But as I left, my phone buzzed with a text from Riley. "Court's ruling tomorrow. I need you." The train ride back to New York felt endless, each mile stretching the knot in my stomach tighter. My parents' words cautious, imperfect, but loving echoed in my head. But they were drowned out by Riley's text. The court's ruling was tomorrow, and the weight of it pressed down on us all. I could still see Jess's face from the courthouse, her bravado crumbling, and Riley's, fierce but fragile. This wasn't just about love anymore. It was about family, about fighting for what mattered. When I got to Riley's apartment, the air was thick with tension. Jess was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through her phone, but her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. Riley was pacing, her hands stuffed in her pockets, her jaw tight. I dropped my bag and went to her, wrapping my arms around her. "I'm here," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos in my heart. She leaned into me, her breath shaky. "I don't know if I can do this, Ellie. If they take her, they won't," I said, echoing my own words from the night before. But the truth was, I didn't know. None of us did. We spent the night preparing, going over every detail with the lawyer. Jess chimed in with sarcastic comments, trying to lighten the mood, but her voice cracked every time. Around midnight, she fell asleep on the couch, her phone still in her hand. Riley and I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by empty coffee cups and crumpled papers. "Tell me about your parents," Riley said, breaking the silence. "What happened upstate?" I hesitated, still processing it myself. "They're trying," I said. "They don't get it. Not completely. But they said they love me. That's something, right?" Riley smiled, small but genuine. "That's everything, Ellie. You're lucky to have them." I reached for her hand, my heart aching. "You're my family too," I said. "You and Jess. Whatever happens tomorrow, we're in this together." She kissed my knuckles, her eyes soft. "I don't deserve you," she whispered. "Yes, you do," I said fiercely. "We deserve each other." The courtroom the next day was just as cold, just as unforgiving. The judge's face was a mask, giving nothing away as he reviewed the case. Riley's lawyer made a final plea, emphasizing Riley's commitment, her job, the home she was building for Jess. The state's attorney countered, arguing that Jess needed stability Riley couldn't provide. I held Jess's hand under the table, her grip so tight it hurt. When the judge spoke, his voice was measured, final. "I've reviewed the evidence," he said. "Ms. Thompson, your dedication to your sister is clear. But the state's concerns about stability are valid. I'm granting temporary guardianship to Ms. Thompson, pending a 6-month review." Relief crashed over us like a wave. Riley let out a shaky breath, tears streaming down her face as she pulled Jess into a hug. Jess was crying too, her tough exterior gone. I wrapped my arms around both of them, my own eyes burning. It wasn't a permanent win, but it was a chance to prove Riley could be the family Jess needed. We celebrated that night at the same rooftop bar, the city sparkling below us. Jess was lighter, laughing for the first time in weeks, and Riley's smile was brighter than I'd ever seen. But the victory was fragile. 6 months wasn't long, and the state would be watching. Riley would need to prove herself, and I knew she was scared, even if she didn't say it. As the weeks passed, we settled into a new rhythm. Jess moved into Riley's apartment permanently, her blue hair a constant splash of color in the space. I spent more time there, helping with homework, cooking dinners, feeling like part of something bigger. My parents started calling more, asking cautious questions about Riley and Jess. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. But Riley's past wasn't done with us. One night, as we were watching a movie, her phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize. She answered, her face going pale as she listened. When she hung up, she looked at me, her eyes wide with fear. It was my mom, she said, her voice barely audible. She's out of prison. She wants to see Jess. The words hit like a bomb. Riley's mom had been a shadow in her stories, a figure of neglect and pain. I didn't know the details, but I knew enough to be scared. Jess was in the next room, oblivious, but this changed everything. What does she want? I asked, my heart racing. I don't know, Riley said, her voice shaking. But she's not getting anywhere near Jess. Not after everything she did. I nodded, my mind spinning. Riley's mom was a ghost from a past she'd fought to escape. And now she was back, threatening the family we were building. I took Riley's hand, my resolve hardening. We'll figure this out, I said. Together. But as I looked at her, I saw the fear in her eyes, the kind of fear that could break even someone as strong as Riley. And I knew the hardest fight was still ahead. Riley's mom was a shadow that loomed larger with every passing day. Her call had shaken Riley to her core, and I could see the cracks forming in her usual defiance. Jess didn't know yet, Riley wanted to protect her, to keep her world steady for as long as possible. But secrets, I'd learned, had a way of unraveling. We met with the lawyer the next day. A no-nonsense woman named Maria who'd been our rock through the guardianship fight. If your mother wants custody, she'll have to prove she's fit, Maria said, her voice calm but firm. Given her history, that's a long shot. But we need to be prepared. Riley nodded, her jaw tight. She doesn't get to waltz back in and ruin everything, she said. Not after what she did. I didn't know the full story of Riley's mom, but the pieces I'd gathered painted a grim picture: addiction, neglect, a childhood that forced Riley to grow up too fast. I wanted to ask more, to understand, but Riley's walls were up, and I didn't push. Instead, I focused on being there, on keeping Jess grounded while Riley carried the weight. Jess, for her part, was thriving. School was going well, her sarcasm sharper than ever, and she'd even started painting, her canvases full of bold colors that mirrored her spirit. But she wasn't stupid. She sensed something was off. One night, as we were cleaning up after dinner, she cornered me. What's going on with Riley? She asked, her eyes narrow. She's acting weird. I hesitated, caught between honesty and protecting her. She's just stressed, I said. We're working on some stuff. Jess didn't buy it, but she let it go, her trust in me fragile but growing. I hated keeping her in the dark, but Riley was adamant. She's been through enough, she told me. I need to handle this first. The next blow came a week later. Riley's mom, Carla, showed up at the apartment unannounced. She was a wiry woman with tired eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. Riley opened the door, her body rigid, and I stood behind her, my heart pounding. Jess was at a friend's house, thank God, but the air was thick with tension. What do you want, Carla? Riley asked, her voice cold. I want to see my daughter, Carla said, her tone pleading but edged with something harder. I'm clean now, Riley. I've changed. Riley laughed, a bitter sound. You don't get to just show up and play mom. You lost that right a long time ago. Carla's face hardened, but she didn't back down. I'm still her mother. I have rights. I stepped forward, my own anger flaring. You don't get to hurt them again, I said, surprising myself with my own fierceness. Jess is happy. Riley's giving her what you never did. Carla's eyes flicked to me, sizing me up. And who are you? She asked, her tone dripping with disdain. I'm Ellie, I said, holding her gaze. I'm Riley's partner. And I'm family. The word felt huge, final, like I was claiming something bigger than myself. Riley looked at me, her eyes softening, and for a moment, I felt like we could take on anything. But Carla wasn't done. She left with a warning she'd be back, and she wasn't giving up. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings and late-night talks. Maria built a case against Carla, digging up records of her past arrests, rehab stints, a history of abandoning her kids. But Carla was fighting too, claiming redemption, playing the system like a pro. Riley was a wreck, her strength fraying, and I did my best to hold her together. My parents, to my surprise, stepped up. After I told them about Jess and Carla, my mom called, her voice hesitant but warm. We want to help, she said. If you need us, we're here. It wasn't full acceptance, but it was enough to keep me going. The final court date came on a crisp fall morning. The judge was the same stern man, his face unreadable as he heard both sides. Carla's lawyer painted her as a reformed woman, desperate to reconnect with her daughter. Maria countered with the truth: Carla's history, Riley's stability, the home we were building for Jess. When Jess took the stand, my heart stopped. She was small but fierce, her voice steady as she spoke. I don't want to go with my mom, she said. Riley's my family. She's always been there. And Ellie too. The judge ruled in Riley's favor: permanent guardianship. No contact with Carla unless Jess initiated it. The relief was overwhelming. A tidal wave that left us all crying and laughing in the courthouse hallway. Riley hugged Jess so tight I thought they'd never let go. And when she pulled me into the embrace, I felt like I belonged. That night, we celebrated at home. Just the three of us. With pizza and music and Jess's terrible dancing. Riley looked at me across the table, her eyes full of something I hadn't seen before: peace. I didn't think we'd get here, she said, her voice soft. But we did. Because of you. I shook my head, my throat tight. Because of us, I said. All of us. The road ahead wasn't perfect. My parents were still learning. Carla was still out there. And the world wasn't always kind. But as I looked at Riley and Jess, laughing and alive, I knew we'd face it together. Love wasn't just a feeling, it was a choice. A fight. Promise. And I was all in.